Hi there. Welcome to the show. On this episode of Enhancing the Human Experience, I sat down with Tracy L'Herisson, and I recently met Tracy at a Transcendental Meditation group practice, which actually coincided with the TM National Day of Meditation, which is an event where meditation practitioners get together and all meditate at the same time, and it creates quite a lot of positive effects in consciousness and collective consciousness, and is very beneficial for the Transcendental Meditation practitioners ourselves, right? When you're doing something in group meditation specifically, it's beneficial for the meditators and everyone. And so always at these events, I meet new amazing people and get to know them a little more. And during the event, we were going around introducing ourselves and talking a little bit about our background with meditation or our history with meditation. And Tracy said something that really struck me, and I knew I wanted to invite her to be on the show to elaborate on what she said and talk more about her experience. She said that meditation and attending Maharishi University of Management, which we'll talk about in the show, was the best education she ever had. Now, I don't know about you, but when someone says something like that to me, my ears perk up and I pay very close attention, because if you've listened to the show for any period of time or checked out the podcast before, you know that one of the reasons that I started this podcast is to share information and knowledge that isn't typically talked about in the mainstream. We certainly don't learn it in public schools. We certainly don't learn it from the TV or from movies and educational material that's more mainstream and common, because we have to realize that, in the West, our culture and civilization was built on logic and reason and what I call linear thinking. And there's nothing wrong with that. We need that to a degree. However, we didn't get a lot of the foundational spiritual knowledge or spiritual thinking that the Eastern civilizations built their cultures around. The gap is bridging more and more as time goes on, which is amazing, because we're uniting the two aspects of ourselves, spiritual and physical beings, logical thinkers and spiritual thinkers. And so it's getting better, but there's still more we can do. And so when Tracy said that to me, I knew instinctively, I was moved in a way, I guess you could call it that I was moved. I was moved to go up to her after the session and introduce myself and ask her if she'd like to be a guest on the show. And she said she would, which I was thrilled. And so we recently sat down and talked about her experience with Transcendental Meditation and all the wonderful activities and experience that she's been able to be a part of because of that. So I really enjoyed this interview, and I think you're going to as well. So let me give you a little background on Tracy before we go to the interview here. Tracy holds a Bachelor of Science degree in ecology and botany from the University of Utah. And it was while studying there at the University of Utah in her last year that she learned Transcendental Meditation. And it made such an effect on her, and she was so impressed by the practice and her experience that she then went on to attend a 5th year of higher education at Maharishi International University in Fairfield, Iowa. Now that is currently Maharishi University of Management, MUM. At the time it was Maharishi International University. So in addition to doing that, she also got certified to teach the Transcendental Meditation technique, because as she'll talk about in the interview, she initially thought, wow, I've got to teach this to everyone I know. So she was very taken by the practice itself. And she then later went on to travel around the world with group meditators, creating coherence in the field of consciousness, of universal consciousness. And she talks about that in the interview. When that program ended, she returned to Idaho and studied the art of placement, which is commonly known as feng shui. And she ran her own feng shui consulting business for 7 years, giving talks in and around the area and also private consultations to her clients. And lastly, she was one of the founders and helped open the Center for Conscious Living in Boise in 1999. This is a place where people could come together for weekly lectures on spiritual growth, metaphysical topics, and borrow books, and just experience a variety of uplifting information. So Tracy was really fascinating to talk to, and I think you're going to enjoy the interview. I know that I sure did. So let's get into it. Tracy, welcome to the show. I'm really glad you made time to talk with me.
Thank you so much, Mark. I'm really excited to talk about this. It's been a lot of years that have passed since I've had some of these experiences. And I'm loving the opportunity now to be able to express some of the amazing things that I was able to witness and live through, watching the power of consciousness to transform a society.
Yeah, and that's one thing that, I think we both feel the same way about how Transcendental Meditation has very profound benefits. Why don't you tell us your background with TM and what brought you to TM initially?
I was going to school at the University of Utah in the sciences, and I became interested in, someone had handed me a book, and it was a book about India, and it was a book about people in India that have a higher consciousness. And I'm from Idaho. It wasn't anything I had ever heard of or been exposed to. It was very exciting. So my friend and I read these books called The Life and Teachings of the Masters of the Far East.
Wow.
And within a short period of time, my friend said that she had found someone who taught a meditation called Transcendental Meditation. So at that time, January of 1974, I learned Transcendental Meditation. And at the moment that I actually started to practice it, I had the thought, I've got to teach this to other people. It was such a departure from anything that I'd experienced. And so within the next few years, I did that. I went to a university where I learned to become a teacher of Transcendental Meditation, and just stayed for quite a while because I was just learning things, even though I had had 5 years of college. When I went to the University of Utah, it was for the sciences, it was for school, it was to do something with my life in a concrete way. But all of a sudden, a door opened that I thought, this will transform people's lives. I have to do this instead. So the schooling that I went to, it was called MIU at the time, Maharishi International University. And it was truly international, people from all over. It's in Fairfield, Iowa. And everyone, all the students, all the staff, all the faculty practiced Transcendental Meditation. And so everyone, twice a day, took time out to meditate and receive the benefits from that. So, the awareness of the students, the awareness of the faculty, the sensitivity of the people, it all was just enhanced as time went on. So you didn't see some of the things that you saw behavior-wise at other universities. You truly felt that everyone was there for everyone's best benefit, which is such a gift. And they had the first year course, which I took, was called the Core Courses. And this was another great experience. And this is actually, Mark, when I mentioned that, this is actually what I was thinking about. Because here we are meditating, but then we also, in these core courses, were learning English for 1 month. It was a block system. The next month we would do math. The next month maybe we would do some physics. But And the whole day was just submerged in only that topic. So you weren't having to tweak your brain every 45 minutes and go to the next class of something different. But at the root of each of those sciences, they took us down to the consciousness level. They took us, they showed us how in English literature, for example, that there had been people who had experienced higher states of consciousness, perhaps briefly, but they would write about it for the rest of their lives. And in physics, an amazing physics professor, he showed us things that showed how some of the very essence of what we were experiencing, why that was, how that was structured in the universe itself. There was a lot of emphasis on the unified field, which I will be doing this whole interview injustice if I don't bring that up.
I'm glad you are, because this is exactly what resonated with me. So continue, please.
Because it is this very understanding that modern physics is still dancing around this a bit in the Western world. But for a lot of indigenous cultures, and certainly in the Eastern world, there is no doubt for them that there is an underlying field of consciousness that unifies everything. And it is because of the existence of that very field that the work that we did going to other countries and meditating to create a sense of harmony and peace in a particular area of trouble. So it was because of the existence of this very field that all of this works, because we were just going over there and enlivening that field in that area. But in the core courses, we got to see why that was. We got to go down into the physics of things, to understand and to learn about superstring theory, and to see how the universe evolved. From an unmanifest state to a manifest state. Things that you just don't get in most
really
school
don't,
systems.
do you?
Understandably, we have to base our things on what we know in the West. The difference is that in Eastern thought, saints and sages for thousands of years have been having the experience of this. So rather than having a theory, writing about it, proving about it, trying to disprove it, experimenting with it, and eventually maybe deciding in 100 years that this is truth. In the past, saints and sages knew it from their own personal experience diving into consciousness. And the two would dovetail. I mean, so many of the things that we're learning now and that we're reading about and we know in physics, the ancient Vedic texts wrote about and put down, even though we know that the Vedas are older than 6,000 years. They were documented 6,000 years ago, and now, just now, our scientists are saying, perhaps this is true. So I've seen enough of that over the last 40 years to just be very much believing in the fact that there's two ways of gaining knowledge. You can do it outside yourself through experiment, through thought, through mathematics, but you can also go within and cognize the answers to things. And that's the Eastern way. And that the gift that Maharishi gave us is he gave us both. He didn't want to just rely on Eastern experiences and texts. He also wanted it to be proven in science. So that's what MIU was all about at the time. It was about getting the best scientists, bringing in the most recent research, and then also teaching us how to have our own experience in consciousness and to marry the two. So whenever we would go to a place, or whenever these experiences were taking place where we were trying to change the collective consciousness of an area, we were made sure, I guess Maharishi made sure, whoever was doing this, they made sure that there were scientific tests that were being performed, that there were statistics. They would look at things like the stock market and to see something that of course, is not subject figurative at all. It's very, very literal. We would see that when people gathered together in a certain group doing a simple technique, that the stock market would go up, the crime rate would go down. And we reproduced this around the globe so many times over and over again that it really became irrefutable. And so that is the main thing that I really wanted to say about that education, because it was from both sides. We had the learning that we all get from the sciences and from the arts, but then we got to learn about ourselves and learn from the state of a higher consciousness, to dip down in there and actually experience some of these things. So it was, Maharishi used to talk about 200%. So that's kind of a quick way to explain it.
Like meaning 100% from the Western or scientific view, and then 100% from the consciousness, spiritual side.
Yes, exactly.
I love that.
So it was an amazing thing, because once you have an experience of something, you don't doubt it anymore. You can maybe have a debate about how a scientific test comes out, but when you actually have the experience of something, no one is going to ever convince you that an ice cube isn't cold anymore. So anyway,
well, what types of course, like, could you get full degrees in a number of curriculum in this school?
And again, this was in the past. I know that it's now the Maharishi Management School, or
Maharishi University of Management. Is that what it is?
Yes,
okay.
MUM. And so I can't speak about it now, but while it was Maharishi International University, yes, it was a full
like a four-year college.
Yes,
okay.
Yes. But and when I was there, everyone started with the core courses, and then they would divide off and pick the topics that they wanted to go into more depth.
And so, like traditional universities, they would have, like, could you get like your sciences and
yes,
arts?
Yeah,
I know that some people have gone through for the arts.
They had business. I don't know all the schools and all the degrees, but they weren't set up for a law school or anything like that. But they and many of the graduates actually went on to Harvard, to Yale.
I can imagine.
At that time, because it was such a new and exciting experiment to have staff, faculty, everyone practice Transcendental Meditation. The teachers came from all over the United States. They really wanted to come and teach there because they thought, this is so cool. I have students now who are alert and lively and really care and really want to learn as much as I can possibly teach them. And, it does go hand in hand. Of course, we have a body, and our experience in meditation, unfortunately, in some ways, is partly influenced by the condition of our health. So most of us we were eating vegetarian food. We were being careful.
Yeah.
It was not necessarily a party time
at
this university, because our physiology, it became very clear to us that our physiology was an important part of our state of consciousness. So I think that was probably also very fun for the professors to actually have his students awake in the morning when they were talking.
I bet. And alert, like you said, and
alert and aware, yes. And there was a high school and a middle school and an elementary school that eventually was also started there, as many other things. And of course, I haven't been there since 1992, so other people could tell you a lot more of the things that I know. There's a super radiance dairy where they're using ancient techniques for raising the cows that make sure that the milk is as full of nourishing qualities and life force that is possible.
Wow.
And something very simple, like not taking the cow away from the mother, but letting her lick her calf while she's being milked, changes her whole hormonal system. Instead of a cold dairy and and not knowing where her calf is. And so some of these things, as well as beekeeping, all sorts of things were going on there.
It sounds almost like another planet, and so far advanced in like the integration of knowledge and wisdom and spiritual and physical. What an opportunity that you had.
Yes.
And the people who've gone there
and
have
the people
had.
who were there. And, you know, and the other thing that's going on at the same time is you're learning about yourself. And there are not many places that allow you, and yes, you can learn by the School of Hard Knocks, or you can
Which
learn
most
by
of us
taking...
do, right? Yeah,
yes.
But it's a slow road.
Yeah. And that tends to make you embittered often, or
It can.
Or it can. I mean, sometimes you end up leaving some of these circumstances and seeing that, oh, life is hard, or oh, men do this to me, or women are so difficult, or this teacher did that. But if you're growing in consciousness, your ability to see beyond that and hopefully see your own role or participation in any circumstance, it helps stop the blame game. And it just, again, as you're expanding your consciousness, it just softens everything. So you just you end up having an expansion of the heart.
Well, and it almost sounds like, you know, having the guru, which the Maharishi was the main guru, and then him teaching all of the professors how to teach and how to help students, you know, having someone walk with you along and help you go through those experiences in the right way is beneficial, right? Instead of, like you said, on our own, we don't have the wisdom to understand what's really happening for most of us. And so we don't get that guru holding our hand.
No, it's true. And, you know, and again, in the early days, I know there were, it was not a utopia, but the thing that always happens is, you know, once you come back to yourself, you sit down, you have your meditation, things just get rectified. And Maharishi really tried to have us understand the role that stress, and not the kind of stress we're even experiencing today, which is like super stress.
Yeah.
but the stress of average everyday life, the toll that it takes on our awareness by just taking little chunks of us on a daily basis and making us be less flexible in our mind and less open in our heart. And when that takes place over time, we just close off. We close off to people, we close off to beliefs, we become very stiff, which of course we can see so much in our world today. People being closed off to each other, closed off to other beliefs, closed off to even their own family, and sometimes even closed off to your own self. And that's all just due to the stress of life and just whittling away at your consciousness. And when TM is involved, when there is a practice, that doesn't happen, or it doesn't happen as quickly. And so I guess I just so wish that more people. I remember Maharishi said that he said in the past, I was a teacher, a Transcendental Meditation teacher.
After you went through the
I
university.
learned there, actually.
Okay, to teach.
It's quite a process, actually. It takes several months.
Yeah, it's very in-depth.
But the first phase was at the university. But I eventually became a TM teacher. But what Maharishi had told us, and I always think about this even now, all these years later, he said that in past civilizations where consciousness was higher, that there weren't TM teachers, there weren't teachers that taught meditation or this or that the mother would just whisper the mantra to her child.
Sure.
That it was just a known way of living in society, that the child just needed a vehicle to transcend daily life, to go in, to touch on their higher consciousness, release stress, and come out refreshed. And again, more open heart, more flexible in the mind, and just a long and better life. And so, you know, I'm hoping that one day we can have something like that, hitting more of our societies. I see that, we're looking at mindfulness now, and I'm hoping that all of this will lead us as a society to understand we're only living half a life right now.
We really are. And, especially, living in the West, we kind of took a different road from the East.
Yes.
And I think about that all the time. And that's why your statement really resonated with me. We leave so much on the table by only, focusing on the intellect and the knowledge, and we leave the spiritual aspect of ourselves on the table, which is so valuable and perhaps the most valuable.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. And I'm going to go out a little bit on a limb here too, and just for anyone who's listening, spirituality and religion, in my mind, are two very different things. And you can be very religious and not be very spiritual. You can be very spiritual and not be very religious. But for me, spirituality is the relationship you have with your own inner compass, your own soul, your own God, because there are so many ways that God manifests for people. And that's the other beautiful thing about a meditation, a transcendental meditation anyway, is that bit by bit it slowly can lead you to a very personal relationship with your higher self. And so your inner guidance is turned on.
Yeah.
Your inner compass. And I think more than anything in the world today, I see so many, everyone, they have no inner guidance.
Right.
And so they're so easily led into different beliefs in different areas that perhaps aren't doing them any benefit.
Yeah. Well, and it seems like, and I've seen this in my own life, and I see this like you probably do too, we're letting the mind, the monkey mind, lead us everywhere.
Yes.
And we find that it's never ending. It's a constant state of anxiety. It's a constant state of what should we do next, and doing and doing and doing. And that's what's so great about meditation, is that it severs that link even momentarily, which then becomes more and allows us to be more fully who we are. And it's so powerful.
Yes, beautifully, very beautifully put, Mark. It's so true. And again, I mean, that's why I just wish, I wish more people would understand the limited life that they're living right now.
Right.
But
you don't know what you don't know, right?
Exactly. And, and that's the thing I finally ran up against, is that you don't know what you don't know. And a lot of people think they're very happy.
Right.
And you're just thinking, no, I don't think you are.
Right.
Which isn't right, of course, to
we
judge like
delude
that.
ourselves, right?
But we do. And we think that, well, yes, I'm very happy. I have a husband and my children are in school and they're doing well, and we're making more money, and we have some pretty low criteria.
Right, the bar is kind of low.
It is
so
pretty
we
low.
get over it.
Yeah, but we do not realize that, like you just said, we don't know what we don't know, and so yeah. But I think that we can see through the incidences of sickness and suicide and opiate abuse, none of these things would be there,
right,
if we were fulfilled.
Absolutely, because those, people, I think those are at the extremes, people searching for,
exactly,
I guess, wholeness and peace, and they find it in those things, which is obviously a negative way to, maybe momentarily gives them that sense, but
I
overall,
think it's more
negative.
escape. I'm not sure there's much wholeness, but it is
good point. Good point.
It's escape and maybe momentary peace, but it would have to be a shallow one. Absolutely. And so we're I don't know. I feel like we've come to a real extreme on the planet, and in some ways, I think that's a pretty good thing, because
I agree.
I think the pendulum is going to be swinging back.
Yeah. Well, it almost seems like that, I really think that inside human beings is a wisdom that even we can't break, and that will ultimately integrate us, like you've mentioned, with the good things we need, even though we're going to try to go and find it in other ways. And so I think that, like you, that sometimes we have to unfortunately crash and to get up and go, well, that didn't work, right? So you really kind of had two, you went to the University of Utah, which incidentally I went there too and graduated from there.
Really? Oh my gosh.
So you had kind of two educations,
I did.
The University of Utah and then the MIM at the time. MIU, excuse me.
Yes.
So you your experience there, what did you do after that? You mentioned you went and did some group meditations around the world.
Yes, at the time, and then this would have been the 80s, and at the time, Maharishi was a physicist. His training was
was he really?
In physics.
Okay, I did know that. Okay,
and he kept all of our training very secular. This was not a school where we talked about God, although I did take a comparative religion class now that I think about it. Mm-hmm. But that was it. That was the only thing. He kept everything very much that could be proven by science or that was on the way to be proven, and that was for everyone, that you didn't have to even believe in a God for transcendental meditation to work, because you don't. It's physics. It's just the way that the human body is made and the way that the universe is made. So the thing that Maharishi had told us, and we started to practice, was that instead of teaching, or instead of trying to teach all the people in America or Israel or wherever to learn transcendental meditation, owing to that wonderful law in physics that it only takes a certain percentage of, let me say, molecules vibrating in a certain way to change the rest of the body of molecules to entrain themselves to that new vibration. So this was what we called super radiance, and 2 domes, 2 big circular buildings were built at MIU, one for the ladies, one for the men, and twice a day we would go into those buildings, rain or shine. I have to say it is very cold in Iowa at times, imagine. At 6:30 in the morning, and we would go in and practice our programs, and we would do it not only for the benefit of ourselves, but for the super radiance benefit of what it was doing to the collective consciousness of the United States. And it was a radius. There was a measurable radius of effect. I mean, again, this is physics. This is not an intangible or unmeasurable thing. And so when a certain number of us, which would approached about 1,800, I think, of us meditating in the domes, we were affecting the entire population of the United States, for sure.
Sure.
And we were aiming towards globally, towards the whole world. And so for a long time, years and years, we tried to keep the numbers in the domes around 2,000 of the morning and evening people meditating. And other people found out about this. And the first thing that I did, the first time that I found out about it, it was more than meditation. There's an advanced meditation called the TM Cities program. So this gives a little extra supercharge to your ability to touch the unified field. So those of us who were what were called siddhas, people who had learned this other technique, we were called on, if we were interested, to go to certain places in other parts of the world to practice this and thus create some super radiance effect in those parts. And my first assignment, the first one I signed up for, was unbeknownst to me what was going on there, but it was in Thailand. So there was a group, there was many of us, hundreds of us from all over the world, because Transcendental Maharishi taught TM all around the world before he settled.
Oh, so he traveled before and then settled in Iowa.
He did, from, I think, 57 all the way through until MIU was established in the early 70s.
Okay.
He was teaching in England, in India, in Brazil, in all over. So there were teaching TM centers and TM teachers in all parts of the world.
Okay.
So, and then they went on to make other teachers and things like that. So in Thailand, there were hundreds of us, and many of us, I was not there. I was actually got to be on the beach.
Oh, really?
Yes. I was with couples at the time. I was with a couples course, but there was a men's course and a women's course closer to the Cambodian border, and we were there for half a year.
Wow.
And we just did our program, and in between we stayed on our campuses, in our buildings for the most part, and just practiced our very long programs and had meals and walked on the beach and got up and did the same thing 7 days a week.
So the same thing you were doing it in Iowa.
Same thing we were doing in Iowa in the domes.
Just over there. So
Yes.
so the source of the radius was more pronounced in that area to heal the consciousness there.
And it wasn't until we got home that we found out about the killing fields, and we found out what the Khmer Rouge was doing to the Cambodian people. And so I wanted to emphasize this because sometimes, because people have a wrong idea about meditation, they think you're going and saying peace, 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 or happiness, happiness, or having good thoughts about something, and it has nothing to do with that. You as a meditator know you aren't purposefully thinking any thoughts.
Right.
You have a mantra, you have a sound that takes you to a more subtle state of consciousness. That's all we were doing. We were just exciting the unified field, thusly influencing everything around us. And had we known what was going on, I doubt any of us could have very successfully reached a place of that beautiful place of bliss and peace of the unified field, because horrible, horrible things were taking place. And again, we only found out about them later. So, hopefully, we did ease and change the experience of many of the people in Cambodia who were crossing over into Thailand, and making that region have it be less stressful, less terrible and horrific for the people who were living and experiencing that cleansing. So the next assignment, this was a fun one because Ferdinand and his wife, Imelda Marcos, heard about us and hired us to come to the Philippines. And this was about in 85, because the Marcoses had taken over the Philippines, and a lot of the Philippine people felt that they were involved in the assassination of one of the other people who were running for president at the time. Mm-hmm. And that was Nino Aquino. And he was assassinated. People blamed the Marcoses. The year after his assassination, they were supposed to have marches in the streets, and they promised a bloodbath. So we arrived there a month before this time and started teaching some of the school children Transcendental Meditation. And then most of us were, again, just doing our Super Radiance program. Again, not really knowing why we were there yet.
Right.
And we stayed there for 3 months. But during the election, the headlines read, "Not a drop of blood was spilled."
Wow.
So it worked.
Yeah.
And then after the Marcoses were kicked out, Corazon Aquino, Nino Aquino's wife, then became president of the Philippines. So again, a very profound experience of seeing that. And we got to see the results a lot more clearly there because, the newspapers, we were right in the city. We were right in Manila. So you knew
kind of the potential for what could happen? And
we did not.
You still
we
didn't
only
know.
saw what happened after the effect, because we really did not. We were not told.
So you're not reading the news.
We're not necessarily.
You're
it was in Tagalog, so
right.
Couldn't read it.
So it wasn't. So yeah, but you again just doing your practice.
Just doing our thing. Yep, just doing our thing. And then some of us were teaching. Some of the people were teaching. Some school children. Some of the Catholic schools had wanted to to be taught. Now, there came a point where the Catholic cardinal in the Philippines, thought that this was a bad idea.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I always laugh at this because his name was Jaime Sin. So he was Cardinal Sin, which if you were Catholic is kind of a funny thing. But eventually he asked the Marcoses to get us to leave because...
Really?
But we were done. We had already done our assignment.
Sure.
So it was fine. We were there for 3 months. So again, a wonderful experience. We were in Washington, D.C. several times. They did super radiance in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, and that's the study that I've read about. I've done a little bit of research on that, but tell us what happened there and what they were doing.
Well, again, I cannot tell you much of the detail. I was there. We weren't told what we were doing, but I know that they did, again, in our country, we could get more scientists and be more clear about it. And this is something that Penny and probably Michael Demick, they would have all the statistics and be able to really tell you. I was just a worker bee, and I just went there and meditated and did the Super Radiance program a couple of times.
What was the period of time that you were there? Just a few times, or? Yes,
this one, instead of months long, was just a couple of weeks.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the most, at least that I'm aware of, the most, I guess, well-published study of the...
Yes.
And you called it coherence. Talk about what that is exactly. Did you use that term when we were in our prior conversation, that it created a coherence in the region?
Yes, that's a term that we use sometimes. And again, it's the collective consciousness of any home, community, state, nation is the sum total of everyone's consciousness. And it can be quite chaotic. And sometimes, given the nation or the situation, it can be quite fearful, and there's no coherence.
Yeah.
And so, as you're meditating, and as you're enlivening the unified field, a coherence can come over the collective consciousness, so that there's less chaos. And again, we're talking in pretty esoteric terms here right now.
But it's good for physics, people like us to know this.
In physics, we you can see these things very clearly in chemistry and in physics. And I'm going to just say this one thing because I love this. I had a little bit of chemistry. But I remember that when we were trying to take one substance and turn it into another substance, you poured just a little bit of the catalyst in there. And then there was a big fizzing up, and the substance became very agitated, and then coherence took over, and it became another substance.
Like alchemy type.
Yes, you could say it. Or chemistry.
Or chemistry, excuse me. Yes, yeah.
Yeah. So no mystery there. No mystery there. And so that, again, is a great example of what's literally happening when you get a catalyst, 3,000 people, let's say, in the Philippines, enlivening the unified field. It's enough to change the chemistry of the collective consciousness so that coherence can dominate over the chaos of the collective consciousness.
Wow.
So people wake up and they just feel a little more peaceful, a little better. And I don't know about you, Mark, but I notice, like, on Thanksgiving mornings, Christmas mornings, sometimes in our own nation, when we have these celebrations that aren't one of shopping and chaos, but where everyone's home, they're not hitting the road, they're not worried about this, they're not trying to get to school, they're just, everyone is peaceful. They're waking up in the morning knowing that they don't have to go anywhere, that you can feel the difference in society. You can feel the difference in that community. Christmas morning feels way different.
I agree.
Than, Monday morning, the average Monday morning.
Right.
And there are people that are really working on this now. There are, I think there's something called heart math, that they actually are trying to get sensors up around the whole world to measure consciousness.
Wow.
And they had a few sensors up and functioning, not meaning to catch 9/11, but they were up and functioning during 9/11. And it's just remarkable what took place.
What data, how they saw the spike or a differentiating?
Yes, and interesting, it spiked just before it happened.
Wow. Well, and this is the thing. There's such an unseen aspect
That's
to
right.
ourselves.
Yes.
And, if you're not tuned into it or don't have an awareness of it, it just seems like randomness in the universe, which we know that isn't the case.
Yeah.
But it's
does
fascinating.
It is. And really, I mean, at least the way I look at it is we are, that saying about as above, so below, it's just from whether you're talking about your little chemistry experiment in the lab or your little physics experiment, or you're talking about this grand universe, the laws of nature are the same. And we are a bundle of energy, and we are going to behave like any bundle of energy. And when chaos reigns, bad things happen. And when there's coherence, then other things take place. And our experience of life is different.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that idea about the chaos outside, because it really does originate from within us, right? And then it flows out.
It does.
So much of the solutions that we seem to find are always out there in the world, and they never really address what we ourselves and our own consciousness. And so that's why I think the problems just keep perpetuating, whether it's the drug problem or the, addictions or whatever.
No, and that's probably one of the most important points you're bringing up. And I think Gandhi was the one that said, be the change you want to see.
Absolutely.
I think. And of course, it just sounds lovely and, it's something you want to put on your refrigerator and fluffy. But it's actually physics. It's physics or chemistry.
Yeah.
And so there's no fluffiness about it. It's the facts that if we change ourselves, then the area, the vibration around us, the unified field that we're touching is different. And our family is different. And when our family is different, our neighborhood is different. And it's physics.
Yeah.
There's nothing woo-woo about it. Right. So I think that's one of the most important things I want to really get across, is that this is real.
It's science, like you said. And that's the great thing about TM is they do so many scientific studies and research that back it up. I mean, I still don't know how much that helps people buy into it, because I think there's still a lot of blocks. For some unknown reason, people are resistant to a degree to embracing it. But I think that's just more of a Western culture type of thing. What's your sense on that? Why people aren't embracing it more, even though they've seen the science and they've seen the benefits?
Well, in the early days, millions of people embraced TM, but in our culture of abundance here in the United States, and in our incredible human nature of being so eager to get the next best thing.
Yeah.
I believe that we are always reaching. And once something is popular and interesting, then it becomes passé. And then the next thing becomes interesting, and the next thing. And those people who actually kept with TM and saw and experienced the benefits, they're still practicing it or some form of a meditation. But people who were looking for a quick fix, but didn't actually practice it very long or very thoroughly or very twice a day for 15 to 20 minutes twice a day, well, that didn't work, then it's on to the next.
Right.
We're very impatient people.
We really are.
And we're people who we have an abundance now of self-help and of things, it's like diet, it's like there are so many diets out there that I think the average person now throws up their hands and goes, well, I'm not even going to try.
That's
it is so confusing.
Good point. It's overwhelming.
Yes,
and people,
it is.
When there's too much information coming
Yes,
at us,
yes.
the tendency is just to shut down.
It is.
Well, and you touched on something really interesting, and I want to have you talk about this. So, most people, it does take time and effort to do TM, right? You have to do the practice. And you mentioned a very good point. People want an easy fix. And so if you stop doing the practice, just like exercising or eating right, you're not going to get the benefits. Mm-hmm. So you've seen that in people who have stopped doing the practice just because of whatever reason, then they lose the benefits, huh?
Well, yes. I mean, of course you lose the benefits because you probably don't ever lose that wonderful initial experience that you had of transcending. But daily life just keeps washing over us with stress. And so we need to, on a regular basis, take care of that. And our nervous systems can only handle so much. And the thing is that, if people knew what they were missing, we're talking 20 minutes,
right?
Or 15 even, twice a day. And I think as a society, we've got to be crazy now because we are sacrificing everything for this amazing, how much can I get done? How much can I take in? How much? I had just read an article, and they said that this article was done a while ago, but they talked about how much more information we were taking in now because of our cell phones than ever before. So, the stress that we're getting now compared to the stress that I had in the 70s when I started Transcendental Meditation as a student, it's got to be astronomical because now we're worried about terrorists on top of all this,
right.
So it just seems like it's a must. Like we have to do this because we're not living life. We're absolutely not living life. We are being lived by life. I have friends that can't remember what they did yesterday.
Right.
And that's one of the things that I've noticed is I'll go to a talk or I'll go to an event and we come home and the next day or a week after I'm discussing it and they'll say, oh, I don't remember anything they said, or, oh, did we do that? And I still clearly remember it. And believe me, I'm not a high IQ person, but I'm an aware person simply because I don't have the stress in my nervous system. So when I'm at a lecture, I'm at the lecture and I'm hearing what they say and I can feel it in my own nervous system and I get a lot out of it and I can remember it the next day. And so it's like we're on this race in life, just a race to intake as much as we possibly can and do as much as we possibly can do. But if we don't remember it and we don't savor it and we're not even present when we are doing it, you just have to ask, what are we doing? What
Right.
are you doing with your life? What kind of a crazy I just keep thinking you're going to be like so sorry when you're dead and you look back and you go, man, I really blew it.
Right. I was distracted through life, or I wasn't
my whole
fully
life
aware.
I was distracted.
And
Yeah.
we're led around by the media.
Yeah.
One of the best things I've ever done, and this has a negative side too, but years ago, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, maybe 4 now, I actually stopped looking at the news and the media, and occasionally I'll see something as I open up my computer and see what MSN is doing. But I'll tell you, I don't miss it, and I sometimes don't know what happens in the world for a week or two before I hear it from other people. And I kind of have this idea that, I can't affect what happens there anyway, so I'm not going to let it in my consciousness and let it in my body because it's just going to harm me.
Wow.
That
is so beautiful. And I've gone through periods of time. Every now and then something takes place and I want to follow it. And I catch myself back listening to NPR, but we don't have a TV. So I don't listen to the news
so
myself.
You're kind of in the same boat,
yeah. I'm a little bit of an NPR listener from time to time, but yes, if anything big is happening, you can't avoid it.
Right.
I'm sure you know all of the big events. You
Right.
know about the hurricanes. You know about the shootings and all of that. But the thing is that if you, just like how we were when we went to the Philippines, if you're practicing your meditation, if you're changing, if you're radiating out through your peace in your heart, you're actually influencing more people.
That's a good point.
Than you possibly could by now also vibrating in that level of fear or concern or anger or the blame game. All of those things add to the collective consciousness in a bad way.
That's such a good point, Tracy.
So you are adding to it in a different way. You are bringing coherence to the collective. And that should be the goal.
Well, and you know, yeah, the media sends the message, and then it gets amplified by all of us.
Yes.
And ultimately, you know, I don't think people are really looking at what's really going on. What is the media's goal to help us, or is it their goal to sell advertising time? And so we think, well, I need to know all these negative things, and the reality is we really don't.
No, we don't.
And
No.
and the fact that staying in your own lane and doing your own practice is more beneficial than getting on board with the crazy train sometimes is so much more beneficial.
Yes. I wish sometimes that we could develop, we as a people, as a race, could develop some sense of clairvoyancy. Because if we could see the fields we're creating, if we could, like a handful of people, see the anger that falls off of us when we're repeating something that a candidate says, or an injustice that we believe is bad, if we could see how that goes in to the collective consciousness that we are in this soup, we are in a collective consciousness soup, and if we could see how we're influencing it, we would stop so fast with all of our emotions and our practices. But we cannot see. We could feel a little bit, and we can certainly feel how we feel and the peace we have in our heart, or the fear. And I have so many friends that are in so much fear from listening to the news.
Right.
And it's not doing anyone any good, because of course once something is in the collective, it's available to all. So that's the other part that I think people don't understand. You're not just putting things in the soup, but you're tasting the soup at the same time.
Right. Yeah. We are the soup. And so
we are the
connected.
soup.
Yeah.
And so really, it's just really important that I think that everyone has some sort of a practice. And I really believe that some people, through their church or through some other practices, can very much establish a sense of centeredness and of peace. The part that I love about Transcendental Meditation, and I'm going to just stop myself for a second and just remind people, it's not meditation. It's called Transcendental Meditation because a meditation is done with the mind. And as you know, as a practitioner now, the mind is taken along for a ride, but this has nothing to do with the mind. This has to do with transcending it from time to time during the practice to reach the unified field and to reach that state of the unmanifest. There's not a lot of things that do that. There's not a lot of meditations or a lot of churches that can actually do that. But it is in doing that that you actually get to release the profound levels of stress and change your nervous system. And that's the thing that, maybe you saw those charts that showed with many of the meditators when they were plugged in, when they had the electrocardiogram and the electroencephalogram.
I've seen the brain charts, yes.
And you can see that you literally go into another state of consciousness. So I think it's wonderful that we have these mindfulness practices, and some people are aiming in that direction. I still treasure this ability to reach this state of the unmanifest field, of the unified field, because it's there that I can influence and make a change to my world, and not just maybe make myself feel a little more peaceful for the day.
Yeah.
And so that for me was a really important thing. I think since I was 3 years old, I wanted to change the world. I wanted to help the world. I remember that. And the wonderful thing about this is that you're doing yourself this amazing benefit,
right,
health benefit,
win-win.
all those others. Yeah. And there's not many things I've found that give that back, that give things to that degree.
Yeah, and I, because I've looked in places too. I think people like us were searching for ways to, feel better and be better and live a better life, and nothing has come close to Transcendental Meditation. Even though I've had some amazing practices and amazing techniques, like you said, it just transcends the mind. I sometimes think that we let our minds do so much for us, and we forget that, hey, our mind is just a tool, and we're so much more than it and so much beyond it. But again, in Western civilization, the mind is everything, right? And it's the end all be all, which it's a great tool, but when we let it drive us, it can become a curse.
That's so beautifully said, because one of my other teachers had said that it's like a donkey, and you're supposed to be riding the donkey. Your mind is supposed to be taking you somewhere, being of benefit to you, but instead you're carrying the donkey. You are working for the donkey.
Absolutely.
So the mind takes you here with fear, and then it takes you here with guilt, and then it takes you here with blame. And then you're at an event, and it's so busy thinking about the next thing and what you're going to have for dinner, you don't even hear what the speaker says. And so our minds are out of control here.
They really are.
And especially in the Western world, and probably especially here in the United States.
Yeah.
And I do think that the media, I think, that's how they make money.
Yeah,
They've got to make it exciting
they have a motive,
for us.
And they put it under the auspices of, you got to know this.
Right.
And like you mentioned earlier, I mean, we're not really designed to accept every piece of information that comes to us. I mean, it will overload and blow our circuit.
Yes.
And that's what's happening. I think people are becoming just exhausted, and it's blowing the mind.
And then the sad thing is, then we go the other way. Like people have after we had this series of hurricanes, we became, I know I did. It's like you lose the ability to want to donate and to feel, because you just go, but I was feeling so bad before, and I don't think I have much left.
Right.
And that's the other thing that concerns me, is that people tune out then, and there are things we need to know.
There really are. Yeah, there are. Like you said, I mean, I think that the benefits of Transcendental Meditation are just part of the self-help or the improvement movement, and it's all mixed in, even though there's like the gem in there. There's some gems in that stuff. Right. But because people can't accept all of it, they just tune it all out and then try to do it on their own. Right.
And I'm so glad you're talking and addressing it and said that again. You said it in a very good way. I know at our last meditation, there was a woman who was talking about some other things, and one of the things that I would have wanted to have said to her is that, look at the science behind some of these other things. Is there a science? Is it just anecdotal?
Yeah.
Is it just good advertising? And again, my goal here is not to trounce other things, because I think that TM can go hand in hand with many, many other things.
I agree.
But you want to, if you have a way to easily touch the unmanifest, the unified field that connects us all and the entire planet, and change yourself and everything for the better, you might want to go with that one first,
right,
and then add some other things.
Well, and if nothing else, I know in my own experience that there was two things that kind of brought me to TM. One, my constant seeking for new techniques and practices, and two, I definitely think there was a divine message that was sent to me saying, hey, go do this, right? And so what was that kind of, what was your experience other than you said a friend of yours had introduced it to you?
Well, that was it. I mean, it was just so interesting to me, because I was totally guided. I will just say that there's all different ways that we come to things, and this brings up the spiritual aspect. This is what brings up the spiritual aspect, because a lot of people, Transcendental Meditation was too clinical. It was too clinical for them. And they wanted more spirituality and more God and more things like that. And when Maharishi first brought it out, he called it the spiritual regeneration movement.
Oh, really?
But there was so much pushback with science. And, again, this was the 50s. So they thought yoga was bad. So, of course, TM was going to. So, again, being a physicist, he knew the truth about it anyway. But there's two approaches to this. I mean, it is absolutely spiritually regenerating. And I do believe that if we're seeking, our spiritual compass can lead us to where we need to go. And again, that is what happened to me. I just felt like I was picked up and put right there, given everything that I was needed to go on with this. And I never looked back. I became a teacher as soon as I could. I went to MIU as soon as I could. I did everything for years and years and years and years until we moved to this property, and it was time more to just live life.
Sure.
Yeah, it's fulfilling on a spiritual level, and it's also fulfilling on a physical level, and it also fulfills my altruistic needs. So for me, there's 3 things are being fulfilled. It most certainly brought me closer to my own higher self and my own inner guidance. And Maharishi, I love this. There was a quote I just read to my friend the other day. It's from the Vedas, but it talked about he who is established in being. In other words, he who has touched the unified field, who has some coherence in their body, that the laws of nature unfold for you. And what it just really means is that, we all see people who are lucky, or we have days where it's the right timing and we're just there and someone calls and blah, 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 and all these things work out. And that's because you're living more in a state of coherence that day. You're tuning into the laws of nature where things are, and your desires are being fulfilled automatically by the laws of nature. And that's the way we should be living life on planet Earth. And it's right there in the Vedas, saying that that's what's going to happen once you establish yourself in being. And Maharishi used to call it the support of the laws of nature. And maybe that's been your experience.
Yes, it has. And more it is becoming, I love that you shared that, because more people need to hear that, because everything they want is right there once you align.
Yes.
I think about, it's told a little bit differently, but the similar sentiment, Carl Jung's story of the rainmaker who puts himself in harmony with heaven or the divine, and the rains come, right? But we think we've got to do more and pound it out, and it's, more action, more effort, more struggle, we're just more out of alignment the more we do that.
And the indigenous cultures knew that,
Yes.
They were going to hunt the deer, so they became the deer. They started to vibrate with the deer. And then the laws of nature supported them to find the deer. So yes, we who think we are the pinnacle of civilization have a lot to learn.
We
I'll
really
just put
do.
it that way.
We really do. Well, Tracy, I really appreciate you sharing your experience with us about TM, and I know a lot of people are going to get a lot out of it. So thank you.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. Thank you for asking me.
Well, that concludes this episode of Enhancing the Human Experience. It was a real pleasure talking with Tracy about her experiences with Transcendental Meditation, and having her share some of the experiences that we don't often get to hear about, specifically traveling around the world and performing group meditations with large groups to create that coherence in universal consciousness or collective consciousness. Absolutely amazing. And thank you again, Tracy, for sharing your experiences with us. So until next time, all the best, health, wealth, and success. Bye-bye.